Welcome to Ellipse Academy. I am Jim Deal, and today we are talking about Zone 2 conditioning. Now, just so we're on the same page, the zone conditioning or the zone thresholds is based on 5 different zones: 50-60, which is active recovery; 60-70, which would be our endurance; zone 3, which is 70-80, which would be more of our tempo; and then getting into zone 4, which is our threshold, 80-90; and then finally 90 plus, which is our VO2 max. We're going to try and keep this as simple as possible, but we will touch into the science and we will get a little bit specific on certain things. Now, first, how we're going to break this down, we're going to get into a little bit of the history, talk about the science, and talk about the application. And again, prefacing this with the fact that we are going to look at this through 2 lights. One light is, how does this work with conditioning to get you into, doing your first 5, 10, half, marathon, or ultra and beyond? Or how does it just work for people who just want some health benefits? So we're kind of covering both on that. Now, for the history, or rather, before we get to the history, let's just talk about what Zone 2 is. As we explained before, Zone 2 is 60 to 70% of your maximum heart rate. It is great for both general fitness and it is great for prepping for those high-level events. Now, we'll get into why this is, and for a lot of people for a long time, this seemed like a very low intensity of training, and there's still people that want to spend more time in these zones. And we'll also talk about why that's maybe not the best idea. A really good quote from a great mentor of mine and an Olympic swim coach is, you don't win distance because of max speed. You win because of your ability to hold a sub-max pace for a long time. Now, this is something that's been reiterated by a lot of great coaches, and this is really important to understand that when you do get into running events and longer distances, compared to a sprinter, you are not holding a fast time. So focusing on increasing your top speed is not going to be always the best bang for your buck. As well as understanding the concept that as you become more physically developed, more physically fit, stronger, faster, etc., you create more of a deficit when you train at percentages, at given percentages. So if you're very new to training and you train at 70, 80%, it's not going to do or 80, 90%. It's not going to create a big deficit because you're not overly strong. You're not able to push overly hard. As you get stronger and stronger, you're able to push less of a given percentage and you'll create more of a deficit. And a really easy example is if you could squat 135 pounds and your max squat is 175, you might be able to do 135 for 8 to 10. And you might actually feel great the next day, except you might have a little bit of DOMS. If you're someone who squats 1,000 pounds, and if you're squatting at a similar percentage around 800 pounds, you can't squat at 800 pounds every single week. Or at least you have to taper in and out of that, right? So when you look at the best lifters in the world or the heaviest lifters in the world, they have to do less things that are more premeditated because they just can't do the same amount of volume. The same goes for people that can run faster and longer. You have to be able to undulate that, or else your training is either going to stifle, or you're going to get injured, or it's going to go in reverse because of neuromuscular fatigue and other factors. Now, just a little bit of the history. Most of the history on Zone 2 is based on running culture. Running culture started, it was always around, but it started getting bigger in the 70s or the 60s, kind of blew up from there. 90s had a big surge, and then the 2000s have kind of been blowing up. The 80-20 has been big in high performance sport for quite a while, but it only became really, really mainstream for recreational runners in like the later years of the 2000s and the 2010s and up. Now, 80-20 by Matt Fitzgerald was a huge book on this, and this changed a lot of people's outlook and gave them a lot of valuable insights into what the best people in the world were actually doing. We have a ton of media. We have a ton of media and books. We have a ton of tech now running, so it allows us to control those, like watches and things like that. There's a lot of races now that people are getting really excited about, like the big marathons worldwide. Like I have a few clients that are trying to get into Boston right now and looking at those and looking how the next few years are going to look getting into those bigger races, as well as ultras have just like taken off. Trail running's taken off. And then there's also the hybrid athlete that a lot of people like. They go, well, I just want to be someone who can run a marathon when they want to, but I also want to put on muscle and look a certain way. And we're now finding out that you can actually do that. And this is really powerful because although you can't peak in multiple things at the same time, you can have a lot of great attributes from a lot of great things. And incorporating something like Zone 2 is going to be key for that. And it kind of comes back to something that I try to preach from day one, which is consistency is going to beat everything. And if your intensity is too high, it will disrupt your consistency, and therefore it won't necessarily be worth it unless it's extremely premeditated and scheduled. Okay. So we know that zone two is 60 to 70% of your max heart rate. Now, for a lot of people, when they're starting off, this seems very, very low. If you're new to cycling, if you're new to running, if you're just new to conditioning, you are going to have to be at such a low pace to be in this zone that it almost feels like ridiculously low. Now, that being said, your body will adapt, and after a short amount of time, you will have